Okay, this one's gonna be a totally non-controversial video discussing a topic that everybody agrees on, and I'm sure I'm not gonna receive any hate comments or harassment whatsoever. If you haven't read the title well, or have no idea what I'm going to discuss, I'm aiming to present my arguments on whether characters whose pronouns are they/them, specifically humans, in Undertale and Deltarune, are assigned by default, and the player has the freedom to choose which gender/pronoun they want the character to have, or if the pronouns used are representative of their gender, lying in the non-binary spectrum. What I'm not gonna argue is whether children/teenagers can or should choose their pronouns, whether a non-binary gender identity is valid, or if transgender people are in any way lesser than cisgender people. I'm an ally for the queer community and part of it. I myself identify as non-binary, and no amount of bigotry or discrimination will be tolerated in the comments. If you believe otherwise, I ask you kindly to go watch something else and seek knowledge in other places than before. With that out of the way, let's begin. I am gonna assume that if a character only goes by she or he, that they identify as female or male, and if a character goes by they, that they identify outside of the gender binary. There are no characters with multiple pronouns, and this is just an oversimplification of a way more complex real-life topic, so take it as such. Also, I am using the word non-binary as an umbrella term encompassing any and all genders outside the male-female binary, as per definition. The first, and apparently strongest argument that people who believe humans do not have a specific gender identity bring up is that the creator, Toby Fox, encouraged players to put their own name when naming the first fallen human, and also to shape the protagonist's personality by their own choices, be it genocidal, pacifistic, or somewhere in the middle. While this, when beginning to play Undertale, may have seemed to be the case, at the end of the day, it just doesn't hold up. First of all, what Toby said about naming the child is not really indicative of the true nature of the character, since, in both the pacifist and the genocide rounds of the game, either Asriel or Flowey directly characterized the first fallen human as hating humanity and not being bothered or even possibly enjoying others' misery. Since they have been given very particular traits, the argument of the human being a blank slate for the player to fill out crumbles easily. They have a peculiar backstory and possibly even a name, considering the fact that Chara is said to be quote-unquote the true name of the kid. Keep in mind that this information is not referencing the demon at the end of the genocide route, but the real human being it once originated from. Scouring the internet for that infamous quote of the creator stating that the gender of the humans is up to the player's choice, we can come to the conclusion that this is just a myth, with no actual proof in the Undertale community. From what we can deduce from the game, not only is Chara individualized as their own person, but also Frisk and Kris. I feel like the gender of Frisk is the most debated out of all of them, because in the Undertale community, the general consensus is that Frisk's entire being is determined by the players. We only learn their name at the end of the pacifist route, and that may be for either or all of these reasons. 1. Only after traversing the true lab/fighting Asriel, learning that the human we play as is not Chara, the character of Frisk having their own name makes sense. 2. Frisk has their own personality, and their canonical tendency is to spare and be friends with monsters, and, by being true to themselves, their identity can be revealed. 3. We only play as Frisk in the pacifist route, the other iterations being the journeys of other humans. I am inclined to strongly believe the first one and think that the other two make sense in a poetic way, especially because in any promotional art, merchandise, or adjacent piece of media put out by Toby Fox, the name of Frisk is never mentioned. If you go to the merch store, every item representing the character is labeled the human, little human body, and things as such. An official piece of merch from Fangamer, a set of tarot cards, had to be modified before being sold, specifically concerning the cards of Chara, whose name is crossed out and eyes made red, Gaster was not approved to be part of the deck, and Frisk, whose name was replaced with a human. What was not modified was Flowey's card, showing the reflection of Asriel. This is important because this confirms that the intention behind the other card's modification had nothing to do with spoiling the game, since you only see Asriel's real form. In the same scene you learn Frisk's name. Plus, I don't think anyone buying merch of Undertale hasn't at least watched gameplay of the pacifist ending. I know that Toby said in a tweet that the merge isn't canon, but those modifications seem to be intentionally made, and the fact that Frisk's name is not seen anywhere seems highly suspicious. In any case, they may not be 100% canon, but we can still say that the end product aligns more with the creator's views than the original fan creation. If you don't agree with my deduction and think that Frisk is the name of the fallen human regardless, then the point still stands. Frisk clearly has certain preferences and unique reactions. Sans can read their expression, they are not interested in toys, they have on them a bandage, specifically said to have been used multiple times, giving us a glimpse into their life on the surface, and I'm sure there are many more examples that I've missed. There are certain actions that Frisk does on their own, like following Sans and Papyrus around, or deciding not to call the fishing rod number. If you believe the character of Frisk is only present in a pacifist run, then it's easy to believe that they are their own person with very clear preferences and aspirations and, therefore, their own gender identity. As for a neutral or genocide run, while there is less evidence on the character's motivations, it would be weird at that point to believe that you're playing as something other than a non-binary human. An argument people bring up when saying Frisk has no determined gender is that of their clothing. While it is true that pink and blue are stereotypically associated with the gender binaries, it does not necessarily indicate gender ambiguity more than it may indicate queerness of any kind, or the fact that they may be questioning their own gender. Also, I don't know if it is done on purpose, but following the RGB additive color model, the complementary colors to magenta and blue are green and yellow, which I find very interesting. Not only does the color argument have no clear answer regarding the color of Frisk's clothing, but it falls flat when applying it to the other humans in the games. It is very clearly established that monsters can reside both in the binary and non-binary definitions of gender. Undyne and Clamgirl go by she-her, Grillby and Metaton by he-him, and Icewolf and Napstablook by they-them. They also have different sexualities, like Alphys may be bi or pan, while the brown bunny at Grillby's is only interested in boys. A character's gender is also not determined by how young they are, since Asriel goes by he-him and Monster Kid by they-them. The pronoun they is not just a stand-in for when monsters don't know someone's pronouns, since Icewolf speaks about themselves in third person, and Mad Dummy is Napstablook's cousin. As a side note, we know from Papyrus that Metaton and Napsta are cousins. We learn from Metaton that he has a cousin who became a training dummy, and Mad Dummy has a cousin of the same profession. I think it's safe to say that all the ghosts are at least related. Also, it's not strange to assume that monsters are able to identify someone's gender when there are instances in which they can literally read your thoughts, like the library looks or Sans, who is able to figure out how many times you've died. Also, as a side note, I will still refer to the fallen human as Frisk in my other videos, both for convenience and because it is generally accepted in the community, so people shouldn't feel obligated to watch this video to understand any unconfirmed interpretation. All this time, I've been operating under the assumption that if I can prove that a character is not composed of just a moving sprite, and in fact is clearly fleshed out and differentiated through their past, their inner thoughts and desires, their actions and their tendencies, then it means that they are able to have their own gender identity. If a wolf of very little importance, with literally 2 lines of dialogue, can be identified as an NB, then why not some of the most important characters? I'm saying all of this not only to explain my rationale better, but also to excuse myself from the burden of reading every line of dialogue in Deltarune to prove that this applies to Kris as well, since another creator, Illuminate, has done a way better job at explaining Kris's motivations and personality traits. The links to their videos will be in the description. With all of that said, we can deduce from Deltarune that Kris is clearly their own person. They are a reserved teenager who likes to play games, consume chocolate and punch, pull pranks on people, really care about Susie and Asriel, are non-confrontational, and despise being controlled by the player. In Deltarune, one of the core themes is that of control over an individual's actions. The protagonist's inner conflict, no pun intended, is the fact that they are not allowed to be themselves. Still, their parents, teacher, childhood friend, best friend, and everyone in town calls them they. They are surprised by their unusual behavior enacted by the player, but no one questions their pronouns. As the voice in the beginning said, no one can choose who they are in this world. I know what some of you may be thinking right now. So what? Who cares if they are a boy, girl, or something else? Here's the thing, a lot of people care actually. Not only because of the blatant erasure of queer characters, but also because it really highlights some very interesting motifs in Toby Fox's games. The erasure of a human's character, the reshaping of a child's destiny, and the fight for everything to be just the way you want. The desire to control, to change fate, to overwrite what once was. Sounds familiar? These people are not just shells, they are characters that people grew up with and grew fond of. They deserve to be gendered properly. They may be just pixels and lines of code, but maybe some people really identify with those characters. Some people may have learned a thing or two about themselves in the process, and some people may be projecting too much onto fictional characters. In any case, I hope I've at least given you some food for thought. Please be respectful if you want to leave a comment, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you next time.